So my name is Raquel Wilson, and I worked with the DWR this season, and I was the team lead of just the carp removal on Utah Lake. And so this is kind of just a review of kind of what we did and looking forward. I feel like carp are kind of previously from what Mike had said in his presentation. They're those students that come and eat all of the food and they were uninvited and then they get free rent, and it's really impressive but not super helpful for native ecosystems. So just as a recap, I probably won't go too much into like the historical carp management because we've already covered that in previous presentations, but last year this pilot project started as a new method to trap carp using box traps. And so last year, this is just a little bit of the summary details, they deployed 6 nets across Utah Lake, as well as used some tracking systems and pit tagged some carp so that we could kind of look at their movement, and as well as had about 41 net trips and captured about 5,800 carp. So that's just to kind of compare to what we did this year. So to get started for this season setup, we had 10 nets deployed through Utah Lake. We extended the season this year by 3 weeks, and so it got to the point where the water had dropped enough in Utah Lake where we needed to move some of our nets. So 6 of our nets were moved mid-season, and then we also deployed some submersible pit tag antennas in some of our different nets to just track the movement of the carp. So this kind of just shows where all of our nets were deployed. The red arrows show 2 of the places that we completely had to remove the nets and move them to different places. The other 4 nets were just moved to deeper water. And so we had 2 nets in the Delta, 2 in the Powell Slough, a lot in Provo Bay, as well as 1 in Goshen Bay that unfortunately throughout the entire season was never processed, just because as you can see from Utah, the picture of Utah Lake, it was very far away, and with different conditions such as wind and having to prioritize other things, it was not processed, and so that won't be included in the data in my future slides. And so I personally, when I started with carp removal at the beginning of this season, I didn't really know what a box trap is, so I'm just going to kind of give you guys a little bit of crash course. If it still doesn't make sense, find me afterwards and I can get out a whiteboard and like draw some pictures. But basically, these are stationary nets. You don't pull it with a boat. You set it up in the lake. Usually we were looking at putting them at like 2.5 to 3 feet of water. And so the bottom of the net is connected, and these are also really big nets. These are like 30 feet by 60 feet nets, like, so just picture, really, really big. And so the bottom is secured by corner posts, and then there are supporting posts, as you can kind of see in the picture, that are connected then to the sides of the nets with a pulley system and carabiners. And then there are gray boxes on each of the posts that are connected to a certain frequency that we can program it to. And then it'll trip the net. And basically there's a little mechanism that attaches to the net and it spins and it releases the sides. This sounds super technical. It's really cool, but it might be still a little bit difficult to understand. And then the sides will just lift up, and then a counterweight is dropped through that white tube on the sides of the poles and just kind of traps the fish until we can come in and get them. So this is just a little bit more, some more pictures of kind of what that looks like. So this is the gray box right there. You probably can't see it. There's a little orange corkscrew on it, and that's what spins and lifts the sides of the nets. And then in the middle, we kind of will work up the net with that white structure. We call it a boom. And we just push all of the fish into a purse near the boat, and we connect the net as well to the boat. And then we pull all of the carp onto the boat with cranes. So we're not like individually catching the fish and putting them in there. And so something this year that was a little bit different than the first year of the pilot project last year was we had this really cool new development called a timed tripper. I can speak for it, also probably all of my techs could too, of it really just saved our lives. So last year they had to have a key fob and be within like 100 to 200 feet of the net to trip it successfully. This time tripper, however, could be pre-programmed. You could put in the frequency, of that net in all of those boxes, and then you could just leave it there. You wouldn't have to come in the middle of the night to trip a net on Utah Lake at like 1 a.m. So, lifesaver. Super love it. And so kind of just going forward, these are some of the statistics from the carp removal in 2025. So we captured over 13,000 carp. The ones we removed estimated at over 100,000 pounds. And then we also continued that movement of pit tagging carp so that we can track their movement better to better predict when they're going to be in our nets, because again, these are stationary nets. We bait them with corn in the middle, and then we bring the carp to us. Our catch rate did increase to 16%. It was mainly channel catfish. Obviously, most of the channel catfish survived, and we were just able to work them up, take some measurements, and then just throw them back into the lake to continue their wonderful life. And then we also collected various data for age growth analyses, as well as toxicology and other things as well. And so in total, we had 94 total net trips, and then 19 of these at least had net difficulties. And when I say that, I mean, the net goes through a hard time. No. So basically, the net we aren't there when it trips, and so sometimes we tried our best beforehand to make sure that everything would trip, that all the batteries in the boxes worked and were fresh, but sometimes some sediment or some wave action would cause one of the sides not to trip, and that would let out all the fish. And so that was definitely something that we kind of had to figure out. So these are just some, again, kind of like summaries of some of the carp and also the channel catfish that we caught. Our average carp was looking at about 25 to 26 inches long, as well as about 8 pounds for the average carp. And then for channel catfish, kind of similar in length, about 25 inches, but then a little bit smaller in weight at about 6 pounds. Oh, I just went backwards. Okay, and then from some of our pit tag data, we were able to kind of really look at some really interesting things, as well as wanting to continue this in the future. I guess that's the left for you guys. On the left, this just kind of shows the density of the pit tags, so the trackers that we put in these fish, and how many of them were picked up from when we baited to when we didn't bait. And so as you can kind of see, there are a few peaks at the very beginning of when it's most effective probably to catch those carp, because that is when most of the carp are going to be showing up after we bait those sites. And then on the right, we have, on the right, it just kind of shows the time of day when the carp are most likely to be in the net. And we definitely, with our pit tag data this year, saw some really interesting trends of, as we know, carp are going to be feeding more actively at night, and this definitely shows that the grayed out areas show the night times. However, we did also see some peaks in activity of the carp right before sunrise or right before also the times of baiting. So these carp were kind of starting to anticipate when we would be giving them the food. So that was definitely really interesting, and we'll keep analyzing that as well for the rest of the months. And then I just put up a little bit of comparisons of some things that we also found from last year and this year. And so with continuous bait days, that's just baiting the nets every day with the corn. And so we kind of saw the same trend that 2 days was the most effective, and that after that, it didn't really increase your effectiveness to keep baiting that net more days. And then obviously we had more sites this year, as well as some of them differed. We had some that were the same as last year. This just kind of shows the average amount of carp that were caught per site. And as you can see, our sites had a lot more variance this year of either catching a lot of carp or 3 carp. So I think that was definitely very, very interesting, especially in some of the sites that we had. And I know we've had a lot of data and lots of graphs, so this is just a little brain break. Also, I did add that in light of the mayor's presentation yesterday. So that's always great. Also, happy Halloween. So kind of just continuing, with those net difficulties that I was talking about, obviously there were other things as well, but again, I'm just talking about the technical net difficulty. We when including those in the average of carp we caught per and separating it by month, we were the most effective in July, and then August, and then June and September. And obviously, there's a lot of factors that play into this. At the beginning and the end of the season, at the beginning, we had no idea what we were doing. We were still learning everything and trying to figure out all of this technology. And then in September, we were dealing with old equipment, and we also had more people come on and just lots of different things. But I do think it is interesting that without the net difficulties, it goes up significantly. And then this is just kind of a summary of the 3 different areas that we had. So we had the Delta, Provo Bay, and Powell Slough, and this just kind of shows the average amount of carp we would catch in a net. And obviously the hope is to improve this and make all of these areas more effective per the area and per the season. And then this one kind of just shows, so with last year and other data that we've gotten, it shows that it's most effective to catch the carp in the middle of the night. And so we kind of tested that as much as we could and tried to get those early times, like in the 1 a.m.s, 2 a.m.s also. And this just kind of shows that it definitely was more effective at like 1 a.m. and 1:15, but then there's kind of a significant drop as you get later and later into the morning. But then you've also got a really, really high count at like, 10:30? And so that is also just interesting to kind of maybe get some more data points there to see what really the carp are doing and how we can best find them and get them to the nets. And so, of course, the season did not come with its difficulties and really fun times of troubleshooting. And so just a few of the things that we kind of had to deal with were obviously the algae blooms that are on Utah Lake, as well as technical difficulties. We did have some live pit tag reader systems, but they never worked because they kept getting put in the water and floated, and cords, wires, electronics don't really go well in water, so that's always a struggle. And then we also had some difficulties with a lot of mud in some of our nets, as well as just like wind and wave, as well as dropping water levels with extending the season. So those are just a few, but nonetheless, we still caught some carp, so that's good. And kind of just moving forward, I mean, obviously, it's been incredible to hear everybody's presentations so far, to hear so much hope of how we can really come together as a community and as a watershed to not only tackle all of these problems, but also find a way to make it a livable, wonderful place for just the natural ecosystem as well as the communities around it. And so just kind of moving forward, and obviously at the DWR and everybody, we are working together as a team to really try and figure out what the best way to move forward is. And so these are obviously just some suggestions and some thoughts, but in the future, we'll kind of see how it goes. But it definitely would be super helpful to tag more carp just so that we can really, again, track those movements. And the amount of detections we were working with the data collection was very small. And so just getting more of those carp tagged will help us track them better so that we can find them. And then obviously utilizing certain areas at specific times as well. For example, with the water dropping, the delta was really, really hard to get into in the later months. And so just kind of utilizing that and having, okay, we're going to focus on nets in the delta at the beginning, and then we can do this over here in different months. And then as well as, again, taking things that we've learned from the past and putting it with things that we're learning right now. So having mixed netting methods so that we could have large seining and box trapping and, getting all the fishermen excited to catch the biggest carp and just really trying to figure out how we can make this a group effort. And obviously, in the end, we're just trying to remove carp. They're great, but not in Utah Lake, and so we do want them gone. And so just in conclusion, I'd like to just thank everybody that's, again, really helped us. This is such a team effort. And so just from the Utah Division of Water Quality, as well as all of the different partners, Carp Solutions has helped a lot, too, with all the technologies, as well as the DWR team. So thank you.